I think we're live.
Whoa.
So we're a minute early. um, Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. I think I jumped the gun just by a second. But welcome,
Sorry for being
everybody.
late.
All right, well, it's 7 p.m., so let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Um, I am Margaret Shigeko Starbuck, the Artistic Associate at Boston Court Pasadena, and I am joined today by Boston Court Artistic Director Jessica Kubzansky, who will be moderating today's conversation. We are so excited to dive into this evening's exploration of composition with guitarist, arranger, producer, and composer Greg Porée. Greg has had an absolutely legendary career in the music industry, working as a guitarist, music director, and arranger with artists like Sonny and Cher, Diana Ross, the Supremes, Aretha Franklin, Al Green, Joan Baez, and many others. He has also worked extensively as a musician and composer for film and TV and has released 6 albums of his own compositions. Greg, thank you so much for being here with us. Before we dive in, there are a few things I want to mention. First, I want to acknowledge that Boston Court Pasadena and the homes from which we are streaming this virtual event are built on the stolen lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, also known as Kizh Nation, who are the ancestral, present day, and future stewards of this land known as Los Angeles. Second, this is only our second virtual event, and we are planning for everything to go smoothly on the technical side of things, but please bear with us if there are any strange technical glitches. If you are watching this video, you cannot be seen or heard, so you don't have to worry about what you're wearing or how loud the blender or the dog is in the next room. We will kick things off tonight with about 25 minutes where Greg will walk us through some of his favorite compositions, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions for about 20 minutes, and we want to hear from you. So please put your questions in the Ask a Question feature, which can be found at the bottom of your Crowdcast screen. And also, please use the chat on the right-hand side of your screen to say hello to each other, to chat, to say hello to us. We love to hear from you. This live stream is being recorded, and the recording will be available to watch here on Crowdcast, as well as on the Boston Court YouTube and Facebook, where you can find a captioned version if you need that. And also, it will be available on the Boston Court website if you or any of your friends miss seeing it live right now. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jessica and Greg.
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate it so much. And just to acknowledge several things, I am, of course, in my home studio, which, as perhaps you can see, is beset by the setting sun, which is tomorrow I'll have blinds, but not today. So apologies for the weird facial expression. And we thoroughly intended to actually have this conversation with Greg at his home. But Wi-Fi challenges meant that Greg is now broadcasting from Boston Court, Pasadena. So we are thrilled that he is here. And Greg, what an honor and a joy to talk to you. Can I just start by saying, how's your pandemic going?
It's going fine. I mean, in terms of the basics, I'm feeling okay, and family and friends are okay. So that's, I had a cousin though who did get the virus. She's okay. She got past it, and it's just people just have to take personal responsibility.
I completely agree. Yes.
Wear the mask.
Right.
And my little spray alcohol. It goes everywhere with me. Mask, alcohol works.
Thank you for that important PSA. Much appreciated. And I guess, Greg, I'm so excited to sort of hear about the composition process because I think it's the kind of thing that, sometimes music seems to appear fully formed and we don't have any idea how it got from a gleam in your ear or your mind to, to what it turns out to be ultimately in the end. Can you talk a little bit just about your general philosophy of music, or what your influences are, or something that sort of grounds us in the world of Greg Porée?
Sure. That's a question I think a lot of musicians and composers get all the time. Who are your influences? What music do you like? And blah, blah, blah. Who are your heroes and so forth? So I think that's a good place to start. And, it's different for everyone. In my case, growing up, in my family, I heard a lot of music. And my dad was born in New Orleans in 1905. And so he was connected to jazz when it was being originated at that time in that place. My mom liked Sarah Vaughan and big band stuff and Count Basie. My sister liked everything else. So growing up, there wasn't any style of music that I didn't listen to. From classical music to rock and roll, to the beginning of rock and roll. I mean, yeah, I'm that old. I was around at the beginning of rock and roll in the 50s. So, but music always touched me. But I have to say, the music that touched me the most came from South America. And when I heard classical guitar playing and flamenco guitar playing, that really resonated with me. So that has driven me. In terms of my compositions, that's been a driving force for sure.
Yeah, because you play a lot of styles, obviously, and you play.
Yeah, I mean, that was the nature of the job. As a studio musician, you have to be like a character actor. Whatever the role calls for, you have to assume that character. Mm-hmm. So if it's a blues date, it's one style. If it's an R&B date, it's another style. If it's jazz, another style, and so forth. So that's the nature of the job. But in terms of where my heart is, I've always loved the classical guitar and the cultures that really create music around that instrument. And that's a lot of Mexico and Brazil and a lot of the Southern Hemisphere in the Americas.
That's so cool. And that's what you were drawn to? That's just like it resonated in your heart, or?
Yes, it did resonate in my heart. And I think that's true for every composer. You hear something and it just sticks with you, and so when you're learning your instrument, you want to sound like that or you want to play like that.
Yeah.
I think for me, the thing that was most attractive of music from that part of the world is that there's a wonderful balance between melody, harmony, and rhythm. So philosophically, I mean, that's what interests me, mm-hmm. is when those three elements are present. Those three elements are present. I really enjoy that. Melody to me is the soul of music. Harmony is the intellectual part of music, and rhythm is the life of music. And in a lot of commercial music, I don't hear it. It's either melody centric, or the harmonies aren't very interesting, or the rhythms are pretty mundane.
And what did you say the rhythm was? I'm writing this down because it's genius.
Oh, right.
Like,
listen, if it ain't moving, it's dead.
I love that.
Rhythm is life, and so
yeah.
As awful as the slave trade was, all of those wonderful rhythms that were brought from Africa permeated, all of the Americas. And so the list is endless. Afro-Cuban, Latin, jazz, gospel, R&B, you name it.
I have to say that organizing principle around music, that melody is the soul and harmony is the intellect and rhythm is life. I feel like I just want to adopt that and walk around with it. If that's.
You can have it. You can have it.
Thank you. That is wonderful. Well, listen, enough of my yakking, Greg. One of the things this is intended to do is to actually share some of your music. And I think what we thought might be interesting for everyone who is with us right now, and we're so glad you're all here, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us. Is I think Greg is going to kind of play the piece as it initially came to him, as on his guitar alone, and then we're going to share a kind of we're going to share a recording of where the piece ended up, because obviously not all of them did Greg intend to be solo guitar. He actually ultimately intended them to be with more musicians.
So the three pieces I picked, I'm going to play a tune called Just Enjoy the Moment. And I was on a gig in Germany, and I was just sitting around, and I'm a big fan of Antonio Carlos Jobim, and I really love his music. I always thought it was very, just wonderfully creative, very intelligent, and just very accessible and digestible for the listening. So I was just bored and messing around with some chords, and a chord progression hit me, and it was typical of a lot of bossa novas that he did. So the initial idea came around like this. So that was the original idea. And I named it Just Enjoy the Moment, and I took it from the melody. So don't ask me to sing, I'm not going to sing, but just enjoy the moment.
Oh, wow. How beautiful.
The title came, so you can play the track now. I decided to, well, let me explain this. Okay. So, once I write a song, then I'll sketch it out and I'll write it out. And then I'll start trying to think of, where do I want to take it? So this particular song I heard is an ensemble piece. But so what I do is I make a demo of my place in my home studio. And I just play all the instruments myself and just, make a template, if you will. And so as soon as the pandemic is over, though, I want to go in the studio and with my colleagues and do a full-on recording of it. So what you're going to hear is what I've done in my home studio, and it's not all the musicians yet. It's just me. It's a demo, if you will.
Got it. Thank you for that. And I just want to say, Greg, when you're playing, or if you're going to noodle along to the composition, I'm going to disappear because it's much more fun to watch you large screen. So I'm still with you, even if you don't see me.
Okay, I'll play along with it.
Yeah, okay. That'd be great. Margaret?
I'll sound off and you can play the record.
Yeah, great. Wow, that is amazing.
So
Thank you for that, Greg. That was just speaking for myself. That was thrilling.
oh, thank you. I had a lot of fun with that one. I actually, on that particular track, when I was messing around with it at home, I pulled out my ukulele, and there's a ukulele on there as well.
I was going to ask, what other instruments did you add? What were we hearing?
So that's 2 tracks of guitar.
Mm-hmm.
The accompaniment part and the lead part, the solo part. And then that's a ukulele. And then for the bass, I use a synthesized bass, keyboard bass. And then I used a drum loop because I am not a drummer. I did overdub the cajon though. I can get by on the cajon, and I put a shaker on there. I can get by on the shaker, and so that's what you're hearing.
And I'm curious, like when this first came to you, did it come to you as music? Was it a piece of rhythm? I mean, like, were you sitting on a bus and hearing the wheels go round, or,
I was sitting in my room, and no, it really came to me. It was one of those tunes that really came to me quickly. It just, yeah. I can't explain it. I can't say, oh, this is my formula or blah, blah, blah. I can't say any of that. It's just one of those things when I played it, I conceived the whole thing pretty quickly.
Wow, what a gift.
Down in about a half hour, I had it down.
I think that is a real gift.
It was a gift. That was a gift. I'm very grateful for that gift.
Yeah, that's really lovely, Greg. I mean, I feel sure people could ask you questions about all of them, but tell us, I mean, so I know you have another piece. Do you want to talk about Genesee maybe, and talk to us about that?
Yeah, Genesee, the title came from a street. It was a very down time in my life, and yes, it was just one of those awful periods of my life, and and so I was walking around the neighborhood, and I looked up at the sign Genesee, and it just brought back some very old memories and nostalgia, and so the name just stuck in my head. And so I went home.
I have to say, it's very comforting if that from a really down time in your life, creativity happened.
I do feel that that's true. I think on a larger level, when I see the worst in humanity, that's when the best in humanity comes out. And sadly, it's sad but true. So this was one of those times, and so I'm sitting in my room and just feeling very sorry for myself. And so I'm playing these really awfully dissonant, morbid chords. Oh no. Be nice if I took my guitar. Oh God, it was like, it just fit the mood that I was in.
Minor, melancholy, tragic.
Yeah, dissonant, it's like. So that was the initial idea, and but as time went on, it took on another dimension, and this was one of those pieces that I always liked the original idea, but it was a little on the dark side, and as time went on, this is one of those pieces that took me months to finish, and I think that happens with a lot of composers. You get a good idea, but it's the development of the idea that becomes the journey, and this tune truly was a journey. So at the point that I had it done, and I think from the time I got the original idea till the time I completed it, it was almost 2 years. And so at the point I decided to record it, it's on a CD that I did called Inventions, which is really my favorite CD. And it was at a time when I was really infatuated with Argentinian tango. and I just love the accordion, and I love that sound, and I love it was just organic, and it was just very visceral. It was great stuff. So there's an accordionist in town who's just truly, he's a virtuoso. He's a master virtuoso accordion player. His name is Nick Ariando. So I went to Nick and I showed him the music, and he sat there and he just sight read it immediately. And he was totally into it, and I was thrilled. So I decided to go in the studio. So guitar, accordion, and violin. The violinist is a young gentleman named Paul Cartwright, who's one of my favorite musicians on the planet. And the recording was just magic. So yes, I would love to play that for you now.
Yeah. Now, so we're gonna play the recording now.
Yeah, play the recording.
That sounds great. I'm gonna disappear. Thank you.
Okay.
Greg, that is so gorgeous. And Thank you for that.
One of my favorite recordings. That is just truly one of my favorite recordings.
And it's interesting that you're talking about the tango as an influence, because it really feels like the partners, the accordion and the violin each have their featured moments in, as if they are tangoing together with you sort of being the rhythm in some ways, if I may be so fanciful.
And this is the thing, I made my living and I've made my life as a studio musician.
Yeah.
The recording process is one process. So as time went on, I always tried to achieve performance within a studio situation. Because, the recording arts are more like the literary arts to me. If you're writing a book or you're writing a play, and you don't like a paragraph, you can go back and fix it. It's the same in a recording studio. If you screw up or if you make a mistake or, you can fix it. So there's a lot of things about the recording process that to me, I don't like. And that's one of it. Whereas what I really love is when something is a performance. And I have to say, when we did that take, it was a performance. I think we did it in 2 takes.
Wow.
And so to me, that was fun. That's just fun.
Yeah, the conversation between
the industry. I'm not putting down recording per se. I'm just saying that for me, I'm at a point in my life where it's just more important. The idea of performance is a lot more important.
Well, it's a live dialogue among the instruments, and it's so exciting when that happens.
Listen, they're wonderful, really wonderful musicians, and they are both stars in their own right. And I was very honored to have them on that session.
Yeah, well, as you know, Zoom, etc., is very antithetical to having musicians play together, which is really too bad. But I will just say, I would be remiss in the sort of more populist part of your career to not ask, was Dancing with the Stars, since I know you played for Dancing with the Stars, I assume you created this long before you were actually doing that, but in case there was any influence, I'm asking for your fans.
Well, it was a great gig. It was a great gig, and I was on there for 8 years. We did a summer replacement show in 2005, and it was a great orchestra. It was about 20 some odd people, and it was so much fun. The producers and the gentleman who was our musical director, there isn't a person in that orchestra that didn't love and respect this guy. He was the best at what he did. His name is Harold Wheeler. And Harold, if you're listening, hi, how you doing? But it was just a great orchestra because it was live.
Yeah.
So here was the routine. We'd get there at about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning, and then that would be the first time we would see the music on paper. We would get an idea of what we had to play prior to that, especially for the percussionist and for me as a guitar player. I had to bring a setup for that sound. If it was a rock sound, then I'd have to set up for that. And for the percussionists, if they had to play certain instruments, they needed to be prepared for that. And that's something you didn't want to do Monday morning. You wanted to be ready to play the tune. But in terms of actually looking at the music, that was the first time we saw it. And we would do a rehearsal with the dancers and their celebrity partners. So
Greg, I'm gonna interrupt. I actually really want to hear this story, but I'm afraid that I'm selfishly hogging time because I know we want to get to questions soon. So since I know you have one more piece you want to share,
okay.
Let's see if anyone wants more detail. I'm sure you could spend a whole hour on that.
Oh, yeah, it was a great gig, and I love those musicians, and I wish them all the best. It was a great gig for 8 years.
Yeah. Thank you for that. But I just want to since this is about your composition, I want to make sure we hear the third one that you were going to share. So tell us about that.
Well, this last one is it's a title that I love. It's called Pax Aeterna. And it was inspired by my dog. She was asleep, and I was sitting there practicing, and she looked so peaceful. I mean, she was just at peace with the world. And so I came up with the title Pax Eterna, which means eternal peace. And so I worked on this piece, and it was all melancholic, and it was all just wonderful and ethereal. And after a couple of months, I hated it. I thought it stunk. I didn't want to deal with it anymore, and I just didn't go back to it. But I loved the title. So then I was doing a gig. In fact, it was a gig this year in 2020. I think in February before all the shutdown happened, and it was a duo. It was me and this Brazilian bass player named Isaias Elpis, who was working with me. Now, I've told you I love the music from Brazil, and Isaias is from Brazil. He's also a wonderful guitar player and drummer and piano player, just one of those guys. And he said, Greg, can I show you this tune? I said, sure. So he picked up my guitar, and he started playing this gorgeous, gorgeous tune that he had written. And it really touched me. It really inspired me. So I went home the next day and I said, I'm going to write a piece like that. That was just gorgeous. And so I started messing around with some chord progressions, started messing around with some ideas. And I came up with this piece, and it was very kind of reflective. And I thought, I'm going to give it the title of that other piece that I threw away. I'm going to call this Pax Eterna. So the original idea came out like this. So that was the original idea, and I just expanded on that. And that piece took me about a month to finish. But that was the initial idea. So, as I said before, what I do is once I get an idea down, I write it down, I put it in Finale and print it out and tweak it, and then I'll record it at my home studio, and just to see how it feels. And so this is the recording that I did. Hello, are you there?
Woohoo! So beautiful.
Thank
That
you.
is truly beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's a piece where I, once I get it to the studio, uh, take it into the studio, I'd like to do it with a cello or with a string quartet.
Oh, a string quartet. Wow.
Yeah, and write those parts.
Yeah, that would be really thrilling.
Yeah, I think it would lend itself to that type of ensemble.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Hey, Margaret, I am wondering if we have questions from the crowd that you would like to share.
We don't have any questions yet from, I just posted a reminder for folks to post their questions in the Ask a Question feature. So maybe, Jessica, we can kick it off with some questions for you and let the audience warm up. I'm sure they're like letting the music wash over them.
I am sure they are. And I'm curious, Greg, I'll ask. I'm curious, like, you said, what did we just hear? What were the instruments that you recorded just now in that piece?
Oh, that's just guitar. That's just
Yeah, it was just your studio recording of it, right? So when you are choosing between a string quartet and a cello, would you experiment to see which is better, or do you sort of have a sense of what will give it more life?
I don't know. I mean, that's where I'm leaning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just have to make some sketches and do some mock-ups and some, just to see where I'm at with it.
By the way,
the piece exists. In other words, the music, I like the piece of music, and orchestrating it for something else. Yeah, I just have to see how it goes. But in my head, I hear that. I hear either just a cello or just a string quartet.
I mean, I have to say, just a cello feels so kind of potentially haunting and rich, and then a string quartet obviously adds so much body,
Yeah.
And I mean, have you ever done variations when I'm in the mood?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I mean, it's like once a piece is out of you, it has a life of its own. It's my hope that the music will live forever. Whoever wants to take it up and say, "Oh, I like that piece of music. I want to try it," or I want to, or think of it in another way. I think that's the greatest compliment you can have. I mean, the mere fact that Bach is still being played, 400 years later, and people have all kind of, takes on it and variations. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
we have
testament to how well the music is constructed.
It looks like we have a question actually along those lines, Greg, from Eddie. So Eddie asks, "Hi, Greg. What is your process for coming up with variations on your main theme? And also, how do you come up with an additional second melody in your pieces?"
Well, I think that comes from looking at, in terms of developing a piece, my process is it's based in harmony. I always try and think of, okay, how can I harmonize? If I have a good idea for a melody, because I'm a rotten singer, so my melodies are really simple. So then where I have to try and invest my time is in harmonic structure. So a good example is Jobim's One Note Samba, which is an example of what I'm saying. He took one note. Right? So, oh, let's see. Oh, no. So. So in other words, what he did, he just took one note and tried to figure out, okay, what chords does that note fit into? So to answer the question, it's like, once I have an initial idea, I'll run through my head. It's like, how many ways can I, in what harmonic structure can I put that melody? And so that's exciting for me. I like to do that. I like to think of it like a flower. To me, melody is like a beautiful, beautiful flower. But the flower is going to be even more beautiful based on the fertilizer it's in. So the richer the dirt and the richer the fertilizer, then the more beautiful the flower. So harmony to me is like dirt. It's the fertilizer that makes the flower grow.
I love that. Okay, we have another question here from Walt. Um, we have heard your recordings of standards. Do they reflect your arrangements?
Yes, they do. And I've got a really funny story with that. I did a reharmonization of My Favorite Things. I always loved the melody, but I thought the harmony sucked. So, I did a reharmonization of it. So this young bass player I mentioned earlier, who came, he used to do my gigs with me, and he was a young musician and trying to get work, and he was working for other musicians. And he came back to me and he said, "Greg, I was so embarrassed. I did a gig and they were playing My Favorite Things, and I was playing your changes, and the conductor got mad at me. He said, 'Those are the wrong changes.'" He said, "No, they're not. These." But I had totally reharmonized the tune, and he thought those were the correct chord changes. But I do it all the time. I love doing it.
That's amazing. Cool. Okay, looks like
I want to hear that sometime. I'm gonna have to make sure I find it.
So that's the harmony I use.
looks like we have a question from April who asks, can you speak more about the process at the very beginning of the composition from thought to instrument?
Well, for me, it still starts with either a harmonic progression or a melodic idea, and that's what it is for me. So that can come in any shape or form. Like I mentioned, that one tune was inspired by my sleeping dog. Another tune was just I was bored in a room in Germany and thinking of Jobim and thinking, oh yeah, and then so that came from a harmonic structure. And the Pax Eterna, though, was inspired by my friend, the bass player, who had another. He was doing counter melodies, and I was very intrigued by the counter melodies he was doing. So I wanted to create a piece that had all these counter melodies. So it can take, many shapes.
Are you able to just play an example of a counter melody for people who might be wondering?
So in that particular tune. So that's it, so the that kind of thing. It was like it's a conversation. So the melody is doing one thing, and you try and find a conversation. So in theory terms, it would be a counterpoint.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's almost a contrapuntal or something. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Find the conversation within the harmonic structure that you're using.
I have music as a language, as a dialogue, instrument, players are having with each other is one of the most fascinating things to me in the way they talk to each other, or even your guitar talks to itself. It's fascinating,
I mean, your expertise is in theater. You understand that conflict and resolution, dissonance and consonance are vital to any performance. And it's the same with music. You're telling a story, and you just want you want the tension and you want the release. That's why, with a lot of processed music and commercial music, it just bores me to tears because there's none of that. It's just pounding you with the same beat, and the harmonic structure is not that great. And it's junk food. It's junk food for your ears.
It looks
I have to say, I muted myself because the mower outside, someone's mower, is playing a contrapuntal right now.
It looks like we have time for one last question. So this is from Mike, who asks, my 19-year-old jazz guitarist son is getting gypped at his music college because of COVID. what musical advice would you give him to stay motivated during this difficult time, or what habits should he adopt since he can't fully immerse himself safely with other musicians?
Yeah, that's a drag. I mean, my suggestion would be to just investigate as many musicians as just listen to as many recordings as possible. I mean, I don't know many musicians who haven't learned their craft by just listening to other players. So, whatever inspires him or whatever got him started playing jazz to begin with, he should investigate that. My own personal feeling is that jazz became classical music in the 1960s, so I won't go down that rabbit hole why I think that. But I think anything from the 60s and prior to that is really the music to listen to, because then he'll be listening to the people who are actually inventing the art form. That's not to say it isn't being invented now. I'm just simply saying that, in my opinion, jazz became classical music in the 1960s. So my feeling is I'm a snob. I would rather hear the real deal. I'd rather hear from the people who are actually inventing it. Not the people who are the librarians and other.
I love this. I feel like I could go down that rabbit hole with you for a very long time. But given the shortness of what I know, that you are affiliated with an organization and you just started a podcast, and I just want to make sure you get an opportunity to tell everyone who's listening so they can follow you in all the ways it is possible.
All right. Well, if the people on my board are listening right now, this is the big plug. I belong to a foundation called the California Jazz Foundation. And it's a nonprofit, and our mandate is to help out jazz and blues musicians who have hit rough times. And because of this pandemic, I mean, musicians are not able to perform, and they're losing their incomes, and it's pretty bad. So at any rate, so at the beginning of the year, we were trying to figure out ways to stay relevant with our supporters. So I came up with the idea of a podcast. So I've been doing interviews, and I would love it if you would go to CaliforniaJazzFoundation.org and click on the link to the Sonic Tonic podcast hosted by yours truly.
I will just say, I just listened to that podcast, friends, and it's amazing. And they are asking questions I would have cheated and asked if we'd actually been in Greg's home. Like, what is your favorite guitar? It's a really interesting question, because I happen to know that Greg has only 6 guitars compared to some people who have hundreds, but he is currently playing his favorite guitar, anyway, I just want to say it's a really rich and fascinating podcast, and thank you for doing it. Margaret or Greg, anything else you want to share with all our lovely audience members and friends? We're so happy to see you in the virtual world.
Well, really, I just want to thank you for letting me do this. I mean, it's a joy. I do miss performing, and I know I speak for all of my colleagues. No matter what genre of music they're playing, that they can't perform live is really a drag. I mean, and the older I get, the more I like seeing live music in smaller venues. It's a lot more exciting to me because of the sense of togetherness and the sense of performer and audience. So the fact that we can't do that right now, it's a drag.
It's a drag. And I will say that this lightens the darkness just a little bit. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for letting me do it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And thank you, Jessica, for both of you for such a fabulous conversation. This was so much fun to listen to. And Greg, your compositions are just so beautiful. I guess the only thing I would say is we're going to keep doing these virtual events for Boston Court, and our next one is going to be here on Crowdcast next Wednesday. We're going to be talking about How the Light Gets In with E.M. Lewis, the playwright, and our literary manager, Emily Beck. Yes, just her name just flew right out of my head. Emily Beck. Yes, so I think that's it on my end, Jessica, if you want to.
No, that's
take
it.
us
Greg,
out.
thank you. Your genius is inspiring, and we're so grateful. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Margaret has the crowdcast still with us, right?
I'm trying to wait until we are done with
Right.
the broadcast.
No, I'm leaving. I'll see
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
you. Bye-bye.